Sitting on the edge of his bed, Paul removes his desert boots, tired after a long walk through the crowded streets of Arakeen. Even though there is a slight chance an enemy might recognize him, these solitary walks help remind him of his former self. He likes being anonymous and seeing how the Fremen interact with one another, finding himself longing for the simplicity of their ordinary lives. He slowly takes off his stillsuit, and the smell of sand that lingers on it transports him back to the old desert, a wild and dangerous place that has changed over the years. His lover Chani enters the room with a platinum coffee tray in her hands, her movements reminding him of their first encounter in the desert. She carefully checks the coffee, using the silver pot that Paul had claimed after defeating Jamis 14 years ago. Catching sight of his reflection in the mirror, Paul realizes that just like Chani, he hasn't aged much in the last 12 years, and he looks at his features, seeing a blend of Fremen resilience, Atreides pride, and the toll of spice addiction. He then recalls his grandfather's words, the notion that a ruler must love his people with selflessness. He wonders if he has truly upheld the Atreides legacy, contemplating all the horrors done in his name. Chani tells him to get into bed, and as he does that, he looks around their room noting its simplicity, especially for an emperor. Paul glances at the glass jars on the shelf, and he remembers that one of them contains a strand of hair from his dead son, one of the many innocent lives who suffered because of him. Chani pours the coffee and asks if he's hungry, catching the tension in his expression. She sits down, gently massaging his legs, and unexpectedly brings up Irulan's desire for a child. Caught off guard, Paul looks her in the eyes, curious about her decision to bring up Irulan, and asks if he should send her away, especially since her trip to Wallach 9 is quite shady. Chani firmly advises against it, pointing out that Irulan is the only channel to his enemies, who would probably lose faith in her if she became pregnant. Paul, however, reminds her that he took an oath never to be with Irulan, but she insists that he needs an heir, and if she is unable to do so, then someone else must do it. He realizes that she made a Fremen decision. After all, the Fremen are used to the idea of a man having multiple wives. He closes his eyes, briefly reliving a warm memory of her, only for his prescient visions to drag him toward a devastating future. Struggling against it, he opens his eyes and finds Chani watching him. He then tells her that she will eventually give him an heir, and when she asks if he has seen it in his prophetic dreams, his silence confirms her doubts. She reminds him that the fate of an Atreides should not be left to chance, stirring memories of Jessica's similar concerns about the future of the bloodline. Paul's thoughts wander to his earlier interaction with Irulan, suspecting that Chani overheard their exchange. He was waiting for her in the chamber, and the air in the room was heavy with the cinnamon smell of spice essence. As soon as she arrived, he started to probe her recent trip to Wallach 9 with a mocking tone, sensing an underlying fear in her demeanor. She tried to change the subject with an equally sarcastic tone, but Paul pressed her to reveal her true intentions. Irulan then tells him directly that she wants a child, a request that is quickly denied. She argued her case as his wife and the daughter of a great man, but Paul replied that her role is purely political and nothing more. He told her he has no intention to be cruel, so he permitted her to take a lover, but made it clear that if she tries to conceive a child, she would pay with her life. His encounter with Irulan ends as Chani's voice pulls him back to the present, asking for his decision. She also wonders if this persistence from Irulan might indicate a new strategy from their enemies. Paul's final decision is that he won't give Irulan a child due to her affiliation with the Bene Gesserit and her upbringing, which shaped her into a manipulator. Overwhelmed by a sudden prophetic fear, he shares that he would sacrifice anything to end the jihad, the religious force that has spiraled beyond his control, but he knows that even his death wouldn't stop it. Chani suggests they should go back to Siege Tabor, where they would always be welcomed by the Fremen of the tribe. She recalls seeing the previous day a massive sandworm near the shield wall that seemed to be calling him back to the desert. Despite this being just a Fremen superstition, Paul still feels a strong yearning for the familiar desert landscape. He tells her that for now he's bound to his vision, but he assures her that they will one day return to the siege. He contemplates if it's worth paying the ultimate price, admitting to himself that he never wished to be seen as a god. His thoughts are racing as he questions in silence if the suffering of countless lives can be justified by saving just one. He dreams of breaking free from his role and abandoning the burdens of faith and destiny, but he is fully aware of the consequences. Sitting in silence, Paul remembers his first prophetic vision back on Caladan, realizing that his life has never been his own since that moment. He fears that instead of just looking at the future, he may have helped create it, trapping himself on this path. Noticing his troubled silence, Cheney wonders if he is angry with her. Without saying a word, Paul gently touches her arm and then goes to the balcony, gazing at the garden and the vegetation surrounding the landscape of the city. The environment of Dune becomes more and more what Dr. Liet-Kynes had envisioned. Despite this transformation making life easier for its inhabitants, he reflects on the hatred he receives for challenging the old ways of the Fremen, especially from the water sellers. Still haunted by the weight of his terrible purpose, he closes the draperies, seals the ventilators, and returns to Cheney.